In autumn, as plants begin to fade at the end of the season and some plants begin dying when exposed to freezing conditions, there's still a lot to be done in the garden. But there seems to be so much. Where do you begin? It helps to have a checklist. So join me today as I share with you 15 fall gardening tasks to help you start your checklist. These gardening tasks are in no particular order because, for me, I get to them when I get to them. There are some that, for me, might be a little more important, but you have to decide the priority for yourself. The first one is to bring your houseplants indoors. Many of us will take our houseplants and put them outside to enjoy the sun and the warmth, but as conditions change in fall, it's time to bring them back inside because they probably can't handle freezing conditions. And check to make sure that there's no pests that are hitchhiking indoors. You might need to rinse off your houseplants under some water and clean off the leaves before you bring them back into the house. And other things like pots. If you've got pots outside that you've been growing in as a container, well, consider bringing those into a storage area as well. A lot of times, ceramic pots can't handle the expansion of the soil as it freezes, and it'll crack the pot. So put your pots away into a nice, safe area. I spend a lot of time in early fall saving seeds. Seeds like this basil that I've allowed to continue growing, and now I'll harvest these seeds. And I've been harvesting seeds for weeks, and we'll do many more in the weeks ahead. One of the checklist items that I do prioritize is to drain and store my hoses and my drip lines. Anything that had water rolling through it during the summer can be damaged when that water begins to freeze. So it's important to drain those lines and then put them away in a shed or garage over winter. Now, for the hoses, you may need to bring them out periodically to water your plants, like these cover crops on days when it warms up. But after you use them, go ahead and drain them again before you put them away. And make sure all of your watering wands, everything that you use to hand water, you have to drain those as well because they can be damaged in freezing conditions as well. I also begin preserving my harvests. So, fall is the time that I dry my herbs, I make my pickles, and I freeze a lot of what I harvested. It doesn't do much good to spend all the time during the summer to get that harvest if you just let it sit out and go bad. So preserve the harvest in the fall. And I've already done fermenting and pickling and drying and freezing, and there's more to do. And then I really like to amend my soil in the fall. I'll take compost and organic matter of all type, dried leaves, grass clippings, and the compost that I make and work them into the beds, or at least just lay them on top to add organic matter to the soil. Do it in the fall and the beds will be ready to go in spring. Fall is a great time of year to mulch your garden. Mulch all of your beds. After I amend my beds, I mulch, usually with straw, grass clippings, and dried leaves. For the beds that I don't amend, I still mulch. For all of the open areas where I'm growing plants or planning to grow plants, I mulch, often with wood chips. For beds like this, well, this is a series of cover crops growing in this bed. That's a living mulch. You really want to have your soil covered going into winter. That really will benefit the soil life. So, mulch, 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 and your garden will be happier for it. You should also begin cleaning up the dead plants in your garden, like these tomatoes behind me. I can leave them in place, but there are many pests that will overwinter on the dead plants that you leave lying around. So this week, that's one of the things I'm going to be doing, is pulling out all of these tomatoes and cleaning up the bed. And then once the bed is cleaned up and those plants are gone, well, I can amend and mulch. And it's a process like that. You don't have to do everything all at once. You can do it in series, but there are definitely things on the checklist that need to be accomplished. Another thing that's done best in the fall is to plant your garlic. And so when you clean up a bed and amend it, go ahead and put your garlic cloves in. For many of us in the Northern Hemisphere, putting your garlic in between Halloween and Thanksgiving is the ideal time of year. So if you've done these items on your checklist, you should have a free bed to sow your garlic. Fall is a great time to compost, compost, compost. If you don't have a compost pile yet, go ahead and start one in fall with all of that material that you're collecting from your garden. If you're already composting, well then use some of the greens and the browns that you're cleaning out from your garden to really jumpstart your pile, to give it increased volume. That'll increase the temperature and help it break down faster. It might slow down over the winter. I know my pile does. But as soon as it begins warming up in spring, the bacteria will get active again and they'll begin decomposing all that material. And by the time you get plants back in the beds, hopefully you've got some good compost ready to go. Fall is the time of year to divide a lot of your perennial plants. So if you've got plants that have been taking up a lot of space, and particularly perennials that aren't flowering as much as they used to, well, that's a sign that it's probably time to divide those plants. Divide them in fall and then spread them to other areas. Same thing. In spring, everything will pop back up again and you'll have more perennials, more flowers than you did the year before. If you don't have the perennial plants yet, well then sow perennial seeds in the fall. A lot of the perennial seeds and the wildflower seeds that we're growing require cold stratification. That means they need exposure to cold temperatures for the seed to even germinate. If you sow those seeds in the spring, they might not germinate. But if you sow those seeds in the fall and they can be exposed to the natural winter weather, you probably have some pretty good germination rates. I love going to garden centers and nurseries all throughout the fall looking for clearance plants, because this is the time of year that a lot of those businesses are trying to reduce their inventory. And so if you want to add perennials or start perennials in your garden, you can often find them for huge discounts during the fall. A lot of the plants I'm growing in my landscape I got at 50%, even up to 75% off. They may look a little ragged, but as long as they're still alive, you can put them in the ground and they should do okay through the winter. In the spring, don't be surprised if they pop right back and begin growing as though they've been in your garden all along. I also begin ordering seed catalogs in fall as well. Many companies begin shipping in November and December. And so I've got to look at the catalogs to decide what seeds and plants I'm going to buy for next year. Well, you need to get online or call them up to order a catalog ahead of time. Go ahead and take care of that. On some of those days where it's not as nice to get outside and do these tasks, well, that's an indoor task you can do, is order all the catalogs you can find. There's a lot of good information there, great pictures, and great ideas of what you're going to do in the garden next year. And one of the things that I think should definitely be done in the fall is to document the growing season. You can still get out, even with plants that have died from a freeze, and take pictures of what the garden looks like. Get your garden journal out and make notes of all of the things that worked and didn't work, those successes and those failures. Do it now while they're still fresh in your mind, so that as you look to next year, you'll have an idea of what this year looked like. So I'm taking a lot of photos, a lot of video, and making a lot of notes in fall based on what happened. Most of these tasks are pretty easy to do and really don't take much time. You just have to get to it. Get out in the garden to get them done. And that's where the checklist really becomes helpful, because as I look at the items on my checklist, I realize that when it's accomplished, I check it off, and especially when the list starts getting short, it really helps me feel good. I'll take a look at the forecast to make sure that I know what weather is coming, because some of these, like the draining of the hoses and the sprinkler system, really should be done before the freezing conditions set in. Some of the rest of them can be spread out over a period of weeks. You might be able to get a whole bunch done in a single day if you put your mind to it, but it's totally up to you whether you get it done now or get it done later. But hopefully the idea of a checklist will help. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.